The kitchen was filled with the faint clinking of cups, the quiet kind of noise that usually felt comforting. Nathan stood just beyond the doorway, his body pressed against the wall, barely daring to breathe. He had come home early, wanting to surprise Anna with dinner plans, and didn't expect to hear voices when the house should have been empty. The words cut through him before he even understood their meaning. You must keep your voice down, and he can never find out. It was his mother's voice. There was a sharpness in her tone that Nathan rarely heard, a kind of desperation he hadn't known she was capable of. He leaned closer, his pulse thundering in his ears. He wanted to believe it was nothing, some trivial concern, but the edge in her voice said otherwise. I know, but it's eating me up inside. I feel like every glance, every moment, he can see right through me, Anna replied, her words trembling. Nathan recognized that tone. He had heard it whenever she confessed to minor lies, small, meaningless ones. But this felt bigger, much bigger. His mother's voice dropped lower, though still laced with urgency. You need to hold it together. Think about the twins. Think about what would happen if he knew they weren't his, but his brothers. The floor seemed to fall away beneath Nathan. Every word was a dagger, each one driving deeper into his chest. The twins, not his. He felt his breath catch, a raw, choking sound that he quickly stifled by biting the inside of his cheek until he tasted blood. He wanted to burst in to demand answers, but his body refused to move. He was frozen, listening as his wife and mother plotted in the kitchen. I can't keep doing this, Anna said, her voice cracking. I never wanted it to go this far. I don't love him. In my own way, I do. Don't love him, his mother hissed, her disbelief palpable. You have a strange way of showing it. If he finds out, Anna, do you understand what this would do to him, to all of us? There was a long pause, broken only by Anna's shaky breath. I know, she whispered, but I see it every day. I see it in his eyes. He doesn't deserve this. Nathan felt something inside him snap. He stepped back slowly, his hand reaching for the wall to steady himself. He needed air. He needed space. The betrayal swirled around him, suffocating and heavy. The hallway stretched endlessly as he retreated, each step a struggle against the urge to scream. In the living room, Nathan collapsed onto the couch, his mind spinning. The twins, Jack, his own mother. It all made a sickening kind of sense. The late-night phone calls Anna brushed off as work-related. The family visits with Jack that always left her distracted and distant. The way his mother always seemed so involved in their marriage, hovering too close. He had dismissed every red flag, trusted them, trusted her. A sound from the kitchen brought him back to the present. Footsteps approached, light but unmistakable. Anna's. He couldn't face her, not yet. He scrambled to his feet, heart pounding, and slipped out the front door just as she entered the living room, calling his name. Nathan, her voice carried a hint of concern, the way it always did when he came home late or seemed distant. He hated her for it in that moment. Outside, the air was cool, a sharp contrast to the suffocating heat inside. Nathan walked aimlessly, his fists clenching and unclenching at his sides. He passed the mailbox, the hedges he had trimmed just last week, the swing he had built for the twins. Every step was a reminder of the life he thought he had, a life built on lies. He found himself at the park, the one where he and Anna used to take the twins on sunny weekends. It was empty now, the playground eerily silent. He sank onto a bench, his head in his hands. The weight of it all threatened to crush him. How long had they been lying to him? How deep did the betrayal go? His own brother, his mother. He wanted to scream, to break something, but all he could do was sit there, feeling like a fool. Time passed. Nathan wasn't sure how long he sat there, lost in the storm of his thoughts. Eventually, he forced himself to stand. He couldn't hide forever. He had to go back. He had to face them, but not as the broken man they had made him. No, he would gather every piece of this nightmare first. He would know every detail of their betrayal, then he would decide what to do. Back at home, Nathan slipped inside quietly. The house was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of the kitchen. Anna was still awake, sitting at the table with a cup of tea in her hands. She looked up when he entered, her eyes searching his face. "There you are," she said softly. "I was worried." "Went for a walk," Nathan replied, forcing his voice to stay steady. He moved past her, his gaze avoiding hers, needing some air. "Is everything okay?" she asked, standing. Her concern felt like acid on his skin. He wanted to confront her, to throw every word she had said back at her, but he held himself in check. "Just tired," he said, moving toward the stairs. "I'm going to bed." "Okay," she said, her voice hesitant. "Good night," he nodded, but didn't turn around. As he climbed the stairs, he felt her eyes on him. The walls of their home felt like they were closing in, but Nathan kept moving. He reached the bedroom and closed the door behind him. Leaning against it, he stared at the room, the bed they shared, the pictures on the dresser, the life they had built. Everything was a lie. He would find the truth, and when he did, they would all pay. Nathan stood at the window, staring out at the gray morning sky. It was one of those days where the clouds hung low, casting everything in muted tones. He barely noticed the coffee growing cold in his hand. Instead, his mind wandered back to moments that were now tainted, replaying them over and over like a cruel loop. It started a year ago. Anna had announced another family visit with my brother Jack. She had mentioned it over dinner, casually, as if it were nothing. "Jack needs help clearing out Dad's old study," she'd said, not meeting his eyes as she stirred her soup. Nathan had nodded, thinking little of it. But when she returned, something was different. She was quiet, more distant that night when they lay in bed. He reached for her, but she turned away, claiming exhaustion. The next day, Nathan shrugged it off, convincing himself it was just stress. But then came the hushed phone calls. Anna would excuse herself, her voice low as she spoke. When he asked who it was, she always had an answer. Work, a friend, a family matter. Each explanation made sense on its own, but the pattern unsettled him. One evening, when the phone rang and she stepped outside to answer, he followed quietly, stopping just inside the door to listen. "Yeah, I know," she whispered, her voice strained. "No, it's fine. He doesn't suspect anything." Nathan's chest tightened, but when she came back in and smiled at him, he pushed his doubts away. He wanted to trust her. He wanted to believe that she was still the woman he married, that their life together wasn't a lie. But every glance, every touch felt different now. There were other moments, the times Tommy walked into the kitchen and found her quickly shutting her laptop, claiming she was just browsing old photos. The way she avoided his gaze when Jack visited. How she seemed nervous whenever the three of them were in the same room. And then there were the twins, so much like Jack in their mannerisms, in ways Nathan had tried not to see. The way they laughed, the expressions that mirrored Jack more than his own. One night, unable to sleep, Nathan lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Anna was next to him, her breathing slow and even. He turned to look at her, studying her features in the dim light. She looked peaceful, innocent. He wanted to shake her awake to demand the truth, but instead, he turned away. The weight of doubt pressed down on him. "I have to know," he whispered to himself, determined. Nathan made a plan. He would gather the truth piece by piece. It started with the DNA test one morning when Anna was out with friends. He took the twins for a walk and made an excuse to stop by a clinic, assuring them it was just a checkup. The nurse was kind, asking no questions as she took samples. Nathan's heart pounded the entire time. He told himself it was just to put his mind at ease, to quiet the doubts that had been eating at him. But deep down, he feared what he would find. The weight was unbearable. Days passed, each one stretching into eternity. Nathan tried to act normal, but every interaction with Anna felt like a test. She noticed, of course. "Is everything okay?" she asked one evening as they sat in the living room. The twins were asleep, and the house was quiet. "Yeah, just tired," he replied, forcing a smile. She moved closer, her hand resting on his. "I'm here, if you need to talk." Her touch, once comforting, now felt like a lie. Nathan nodded but said nothing. He couldn't, not yet. Finally, the results arrived. The envelope felt heavy in his hands as he stood in his study, the door locked behind him. He tore it open, his fingers trembling. The words blurred before his eyes. But one line stood out, cold and final: paternity excluded. Nathan sank into his chair, the paper slipping from his grasp. "They're not mine, my own brother," he whispered, his voice raw. The room seemed to tilt, and he gripped the edge of the desk, trying to steady himself. Every doubt, every suspicion was confirmed. The life he had built, the love he thought he had, it was all a lie. Rage bubbled up inside him, hot and consuming. He slammed his fist onto the desk, the impact reverberating through the room. "Why?" he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "Why would you do this?" He paced the room, his mind racing, memories flooding back, birthdays, family trips, quiet nights at home. Every moment was now tainted. He thought of confronting Anna, of demanding answers, but he wasn't ready. He needed to be sure, to have every piece of the puzzle in place before he acted. That night, Nathan watched Anna as she slept, his heart heavy with a mix of love and hate. He wanted to scream to shake her awake and make her feel his pain, but instead, he turned away. The betrayal settled deep in his bones. The next morning, he moved through the house like a ghost. Anna noticed his silence, the tension in his movements. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern in her eyes. "Fine," he said, barely glancing at her. "Just busy." She nodded, but he saw the worry in her expression. For a brief moment, he almost felt pity. Almost. But then he remembered the lies, the deception. There would be no pity, no forgiveness in the days that followed. Nathan began to collect more evidence. He went through phone records, found messages Anna had deleted, watched her movements when she thought he wasn't paying attention. Each discovery was another nail in the coffin of their marriage. One evening, as he sat alone in his study, Nathan stared at the evidence laid out before him. The truth was undeniable. The woman he loved, the brother he trusted, and even his own mother, they had all betrayed him. But this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. He would make them pay. He would tear down the lies they had built brick by brick. His hands clenched into fists. "You think I don't know," he whispered to the empty room. "But I do, and you'll regret every moment of it." The house was silent, too silent. Nathan stood in the doorway of the bedroom, watching the rhythmic rise and fall of Anna's chest as she slept. Her face was peaceful in the dim light, made a mockery of the storm that raged within him. He had no intention of confronting her, not yet. He had made his decision that night. He would vanish quietly. He crossed to the closet. The floor creaked beneath his weight, and he paused, holding his breath. When Anna didn't stir, he moved again, pulling down a small travel bag. He packed quickly but deliberately, clothes, essentials, the bare minimum he would need. Each item he placed in the bag felt like another thread cut from the life he was about to leave behind. He made his way through the house, his footsteps barely more than whispers on the hardwood floor. He stopped by the twins' room, his heart twisting painfully. He stepped inside and approached their beds, watching their sleeping faces, their breaths slow and even. They looked innocent, too innocent. Nathan felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Love, sorrow, betrayal. They weren't his, not biologically, but for years he had loved them as his own. "Goodbye," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry." Turning away, he forced himself to leave. In the living room, he paused to look around. Everything felt different now. The family photos, the furniture they picked out together, even the smell of the home they all shared felt like pieces of a stage set for a cruel play. He had unwittingly starred in it. With one last look, he slipped out the door, closing it softly behind him. It was a crisp night, the air biting at his skin. Nathan didn't care. He needed the cold to keep him sharp, to numb the raw edges of his emotions. His car was parked in the driveway, but he wouldn't use it. It would be too easy to trace. Instead, he walked, his steps echoing through the quiet streets of the neighborhood. He didn't know exactly where he was going, just away from the lies and from the people he once trusted. Each step felt like shedding a layer of his old life, leaving it behind piece by piece. Morning came, and with it, panic in the house he had left. Anna woke to find his side of the bed cold. His clothes were gone. She checked the bathroom, the kitchen, even the garage. Panic tightened around her chest like a vice. She dialed his number, but it went straight to voicemail. "Pick up, Nathan," she pleaded, her voice shaking. "Please." By mid-morning, she was pacing the living room, her mind racing. Her hands trembled as she tried to call him again. Nothing. When the doorbell rang, she nearly jumped out of her skin. She opened it to find his mother standing there, her face tight with concern. "He's gone," Anna blurted out, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know where he is." His mother stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "Calm yourself, Anna," she said, her voice low but firm. "Panic won't help." "How can you say that?" Anna snapped, wiping her eyes. "He's gone. He wouldn't just leave." His mother's eyes narrowed. "Nathan has a temper, but he always comes back. He needs time, that's all." Anna shook her head, pacing again. "Something feels different. It's like he just disappeared. No note, nothing." His mother's expression hardened. "Well, handle this. You need to be strong for the twins." Anna wanted to scream, to shake his mother and demand she show some emotion, some real concern. But instead, she sank into the couch, her mind spiraling. She thought of every interaction, every moment leading up to this. Had he known? Did he find out? The questions knotted at her, each one more terrifying than the last. Far from the turmoil he left behind, Nathan settled into his new life, or tried to. He found a modest apartment in a city hours away, using cash for everything and avoiding anything that could lead back to him. He took on odd jobs, blending into the background. Each day was a blur of routine, meant to keep him from thinking too much. But at night, the memories came rushing back. The betrayal, the lies, the life he had lost. One evening, as he sat in his darkened apartment with a bottle of whiskey in hand, Nathan thought about calling them, about screaming down the line, asking why, demanding answers. But he couldn't bring himself to do it. He wasn't ready. Instead, he turned to the only solace he could find, building a new version of himself. He threw himself into work, into self-improvement, into anything that would make him stronger. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Time passed, but the pain didn't fade. It became a part of him, a scar that never fully healed. He kept tabs on Anna and the twins from afar, using contacts and information he shouldn't have access to. He knew they were struggling. He saw the financial strain, the uncertainty. A part of him almost felt pity, but he buried it deep. 1 year became 2, then 3. Nathan changed. He grew harder, more distant. He trusted no one, kept everyone at arm's length. The man who had once been a loving husband and father was gone, replaced by someone colder. But beneath it all, the wound still bled. Back at home, Anna continued to search for him, even as the years dragged on. She tried to hold the family together, to pretend everything was fine, but every holiday, every milestone without him was a reminder of what she had lost. The guilt ate at her, hollowing her out. She knew the truth, knew what had driven him away, and it destroyed her a little more every day. One night, as she sat alone in the dark, a photo album in her lap, she whispered, "Come back, Nathan, please." But Nathan was gone, swallowed by the shadows of his own pain. And for now, he had no intention of returning. The years had done little to dull the ache in Nathan's chest. 5 years gone, and still, every morning he felt the sting of betrayal as sharply as the day he'd left. He'd rebuilt his life, kept himself detached, determined never to be vulnerable again. Yet one morning, as he sorted through his emails, a subject line caught his eye. "Dad, we need money for college." His breath hitched. He opened the message, his fingers trembling despite his iron resolve. The words were straightforward, practical, with no mention of his disappearance, no questions about where he had been, just a request, like he was a bank and not a father. Or as they would soon know, not their father at all. Nathan leaned back in his chair, a bitter smile tugging at his lips. Did they think he'd forgotten that he moved on, ready to play the role of doing dad again? He closed his laptop and stared out the window. The decision was already made. He would meet them, but not as the man they remembered. The coffee shop was quiet, sterile. the kind of place where small talk echoed awkwardly and people avoided eye contact. Nathan chose a table in the corner, far from the door. He sipped his black coffee, each bitter drop a reminder to stay focused. He had brought everything. The DNA results, the recording of Anna and his mother, the tools of truth that had destroyed him. Now they would do the same to others. The door chimed, and the twins walked in, taller now, faces more defined. Nathan felt a pang in his chest, but forced it down as they spotted him and approached. He remained seated, his face a mask of calm indifference. They sat across from him, exchanging a hesitant glance. There was no warmth in Nathan's eyes, only cold calculation. "Hi, Dad," said the older twin, his voice tentative. Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Dad?" He let the word hang in the air, heavy with meaning. "Is that what I am?" The twins shifted uncomfortably. The younger one spoke up. "We haven't seen you in years. We just thought that you'd come running back to throw money at your problems." Nathan interrupted, his tone icy. "Before we go any further, there's something you need to see." He reached into his bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. He slid the envelope across the table, and the twins stared at it, confusion flickering across their faces. The older twin picked it up and opened it. Nathan watched as their eyes scanned the DNA results, their expressions morphing from confusion to disbelief to horror. What is this?" the younger twin whispered, his voice cracking. "Proof," Nathan said, leaning back in his chair. "You're not mine biologically, at least. My brother, Uncle Jack, is your father." The words hung heavy in the air. The coffee shop's background noise faded, leaving only the stunned silence of the twins. The older one's hands trembled as he set the paper down. "You're not our dad?" he asked, tears welling in his eyes. Nathan's jaw clenched. He forced himself to remain calm. "I raised you. I loved you. But the truth is, your mother and my own mother lied. They let me believe you were mine while they played their games behind my back." The younger twin shook his head, as if trying to wake from a nightmare. "But why now? Why tell us like this?" Nathan's eyes hardened. "You asked me for money before. I give you anything. You need to know who you're really asking." He pulled out his phone, tapping a button. The recording played, Anna's voice unmistakable, raw with anxiety. "He can never find out. Think about what would happen if he knew." His mother's voice followed, cold and practical. "He always comes back. We just have to keep it quiet." The twins listened, their faces pale. The recording ended, and for a moment, no one spoke. How could they? The older twin whispered, his voice barely audible. Nathan leaned forward, his gaze intense. "You think this doesn't hurt me? That I wanted any of this? Your mother, my own mother, they betrayed me. And now you come to me, calling me dad, asking for help, without even knowing who I really am to you." Tears streamed down the younger twin's face. "We didn't know," he said, but Nathan cut him off with a wave of his hand. "I'm not here for your tears. You want to go to college? Ask your mother. Ask your real father, Uncle Jack. Ask your grandmother. They're the ones who decided to lie." The older twin's voice broke. "You raised us. You were there. That means something, doesn't it?" Nathan's expression softened for a fraction of a second before hardening again. "It did, once, but they killed that. I won't be the fool again." He stood, grabbing his bag. The twins stared at him, desperation in their eyes. "You're just going to leave," the younger one pleaded. Nathan paused, looking at them with a mixture of pain and resolve. "I already did, 5 years ago. This is just a reminder." He turned and walked away, each step heavy but resolute. Behind him, the twins remained at the table, their world crumbling as his once had. The door closed behind him, cutting off whatever words they might have said. Nathan didn't look back. He wouldn't let himself. Outside, the sky was overcast, mirroring the turmoil inside him. He took a deep breath, the cold air filling his lungs. He had done what needed to be done. The truth was a cruel LA, but it was better than living in a lie. As he walked away from the coffee shop, Nathan knew there would be no going back, not for him and not for them. Nathan stood in his small apartment, listening to the knocks at the door grow more insistent. He had been expecting this. Word of the meeting with the twins had undoubtedly reached Anna and his mother. Now they were here, desperate, clawing for a resolution he would not grant. The pounding ceased, replaced by muffled voices outside. He took a deep breath, fighting back the surge of memories. The lies, the betrayal, the years he had wasted on people who had torn him apart without remorse. He walked to the door slowly, his footsteps steady. He would face them, but he would not be their savior, not anymore. He unlocked the door and pulled it open. Anna stood on the threshold, tears streaming down her face. His mother was beside her, her expression a mixture of pleading and forced composure. For a moment, no one spoke. The air crackled with tension. "Nathan," Anna's voice broke. She reached for him, but he stepped back, letting the door act as a barrier. Her arm fell limply to her side. "What do you want?" His voice was cold, detached. Anna's lips trembled. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," he replied, his tone flat. "You had years to tell the truth. You chose lies instead." Anna stepped forward again, her eyes desperate. "I was wrong. I know that. I was weak, Nathan. I made a terrible mistake." Nathan's jaw clenched. His hands balled into fists at his sides. "Mistake? You call years of lying a mistake? You call shattering my life a mistake?" His mother interjected, her voice trembling. "Nathan, please. We did what we thought was best." He turned on her, his eyes blazing. "Best for who? For yourselves? To protect your secrets? You didn't care what it would do to me." She shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "You're my son. I didn't want to lose you." "You lost me the moment you chose to lie," he spat. "You made me believe in a family that didn't exist. You watched me love those children and let me live a lie." Anna fell to her knees, sobbing. "I never stopped loving you, Nathan. I was scared. I was ashamed, but I loved you." He stared at her, unmoved. "Love? That's not love. Love doesn't do this." His voice cracked, but he pressed on. "You destroyed me, both of you. And now you come here, begging for what? Forgiveness? Closure?" "Yes," Anna cried out, her hands clutching at the hem of his pants. "Please, Nathan, I can't live with this guilt anymore." His mother stepped forward, her voice soft. "Nathan, you can't throw away family. We can find a way to move past this." He laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. "Family, you don't know what that word means. Family doesn't betray each other. Family doesn't watch someone suffer and stay silent." His mother flinched, her hands trembling. "We were wrong, we see that now. It's too late." His words were like a hammer, cold and final. He pulled his leg free from Anna's grasp and stepped back. "You took everything from me. You expect me to open my arms and pretend it never happened? To give you absolution?" Anna crawled forward, her face streaked with tears. "I'll do anything, Nathan, anything, just don't shut us out." He looked at her, the woman he had once loved more than anything, now reduced to a shadow of herself. He wanted to feel pity, but all he felt was emptiness. "I gave you my trust, my love. You spat on it. There is nothing left to save." Anna's cries grew louder, echoing through the hallway. His mother tried to steady herself, her voice shaking. "Nathan, please. We're still your family." He stared at them, feeling nothing but cold resolve. "No, you stopped being my family when you chose lies over the truth." With that, he stepped back and closed the door. Their pleading voices grew muffled, then frantic. They banged on the door, their fists thudding against the wood, their screams raw with desperation. "Nathan, please don't do this." He closed his eyes, their cries clawing at the edges of his mind. He turned away and walked deeper into the apartment, their voices fading. They had made their choices. Now they had to live with the consequences. For the first time in years, Nathan felt a small measure of peace. He had taken back control. Their suffering was not his burden anymore. He would never open that door again. The days after Nathan closed the door on Anna and his mother were not easy. Silence settled over his apartment, heavy and oppressive, but also oddly liberating. For the first time in years, he had cut ties with a past that poisoned him. Now he was free to chart his own course. Yet freedom came with the daunting task of learning to trust again. Months passed slowly. Nathan threw himself into work, staying late at the office, taking on extra projects, anything to keep himself busy and distracted. But solitude became suffocating. He knew he needed something more than just work. He needed a life worth living again. One evening, at the urging of a colleague, he reluctantly agreed to join a small gathering at a cozy bar downtown. He expected nothing but forced smiles and awkward conversations. Instead, he found her. She stood at the bar, swirling a glass of wine, lost in thought. Her name was Evelyn. They exchanged a few words, casual and polite. She laughed at one of his jokes, a genuine, soft laugh that seemed to cut through the gloom clinging to him. Over the course of the evening, their conversation shifted from small talk to something deeper. "I wasn't going to come tonight," Evelyn admitted, tracing the rim of her glass with her finger. "I'm not great with crowds." "Same," Nathan replied, feeling a connection he hadn't expected. "But sometimes being alone is worse." She nodded, her eyes meeting his. "Yeah, sometimes." The night ended with an exchange number, a hesitant step forward for both of them. In the weeks that followed, they met again. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into long walks. Bit by bit, Nathan found himself opening up. One evening, they sat on a park bench under a canopy of stars. The air was crisp, the quiet soothing. Evelyn leaned back, her gaze fixed on the sky. "You ever feel like everything you believed in was ripped away?" Nathan's chest tightened. "More than I'd like to admit," he said. She turned to him, her eyes searching his. "I lost someone I trusted. He betrayed me. It left scars." Nathan nodded slowly. "I know what that's like." For a long moment, they sat in silence, two broken souls finding comfort in shared pain. Then, Evelyn spoke, her voice steady but raw. "I'm not perfect, Nathan. I've been hurt, and I've made mistakes, but I won't lie to you. I can promise you that." He took a deep breath, the weight of his past pressing on him. "It's that you're honest. That's all I need." Their journey wasn't easy. Trust was fragile, a delicate thread that could snap with a wrong word or misplaced glance. Nathan struggled with moments of doubt. Sometimes, when Evelyn's phone buzzed late at night, his heart raced with irrational fear. She noticed, of course. "You don't have to worry," she said one evening, setting her phone down and taking his hand. "If you ever have questions, ask. I'll always tell you the truth." "I know," he said, though his voice trembled. "It's just hard." "I understand," she squeezed his hand. "But you're trying. That's what matters." Slowly, Nathan began to heal. He started to trust her words, her intentions. They built routines, cooking dinner together, reading side by side, sharing their fears and dreams. Each small moment was a victory, a step away from the darkness that had consumed him. One day, as they walked through a bustling street fair, Evelyn paused by a booth selling handcrafted trinkets. She picked up a small, intricately carved wooden bird and held it out to him. "For you," she said, smiling. "A reminder that you can fly again." Nathan took it, turning it over in his hands. "Thank you," he said. "It's not much," she replied, her voice soft. "But I believe in you." He looked at her, emotion tightening his throat. "You've given me more than you know." Nathan's path to peace wasn't linear. There were setbacks, moments when old wounds bled anew. He couldn't forget Anna's betrayal or his mother's complicity. Occasionally, he watched them from afar. Anna, his mother, and his brother Jack. Their lives were shells of what they once were, marked by regret and the weight of their choices. Anna moved through life with a haunted expression. His mother seemed frail, as if carrying the burden of her lies had aged her overnight. Jack kept his distance, avoiding all contact. The twins, too, had suffered. Though innocent in the chaos, they bore the scars of their parents' lies. Nathan saw them occasionally from a distance. They seemed lost, struggling to make sense of a world that had shifted beneath their feet. He wished things had been different for them, but some wounds were not his to tend. One evening, as Nathan sat on his balcony with Evelyn, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he spoke softly. "I used to think I'd never feel normal again, like I'd always be broken." She leaned against him, her warmth a comfort. "You're not broken, you're healing, and you're not alone. Tears stung his eyes, but he let them fall. Thank you, she asked, brushing a tear from his cheek. For being here. For not giving up on me. She kissed him gently, her lips a promise. I'm not going anywhere. Nathan closed his eyes, letting himself believe in the possibility of something better. Trust was fragile, but with Evelyn, it was something he was willing to fight for. Together, they would rebuild, one step at a time. As the stars blinked into the night sky, he felt, for the first time in years, that he was exactly where he needed to be. Years passed, and life moved on, but not for Anna. The cost of her betrayal had stripped her of everything. Her reputation within their small town crumbled first. Rumors spread quickly, fueled by the shocking revelation of her affair. Frank distanced themselves, invitations to community events disappeared, and she became a ghost passing through familiar streets with lowered eyes and hurried steps. Any stability she had once relied on from Nathan was gone. Her part-time job was not enough to cover mounting bills, and Jack, her partner in deception, had retreated entirely, leaving her to shoulder the fallout alone. The twins grew distant, their relationship strained by their mother's deceit and the harsh reality Nathan had laid bare. They could not understand her choices, and while they still spoke to her, their words were cold and transactional. The warmth of family was gone. Nathan's mother fared no better. Consumed by guilt, she withdrew from everyone once the matriarch. She became a recluse, curtains drawn, phone calls unanswered. She lived in self-imposed isolation, haunted by the pain she had caused. The betrayal had eaten away at her spirit. In her quiet moments, she wept for the family she had destroyed and the son who no longer saw her as a mother. Jack, Nathan's brother, carried a different burden. He was a pariah. The affair had destroyed not only his relationship with Nathan, but with everyone who had once called him a friend. He lived a lonely, hollow existence, unable to shake the shame. He avoided public places, rarely spoke of the past, and spent his days drowning in work that gave him no satisfaction. Years later, there was a knock at Nathan's door. He opened it to find Anna standing there, thin and weary. She looked like she had aged decades in the few short years since their last encounter. For a moment, he said nothing. The memories flooded back, the lies, the pain. But he did not allow himself to feel anything for her now. He had come too far to be dragged down by the past. "Please, Anna," she began, her voice raw. "I know I don't deserve your kindness. I'm not here for me." Nathan crossed his arms, his expression hard. "Then why are you here?" she swallowed, tears brimming in her eyes. "The twins need you, Nathan. They're lost. They need their father." He felt a pang in his chest at the mention of the twins. They had reached out to him over the years, awkwardly and with hesitation, but he had kept his distance, giving them space to understand the truth in their own way. "I gave them what they needed, the truth," he said, his voice even. "That's all I'll ever give." Anna's shoulders slumped, and for a moment, she looked like she might collapse. "I know I hurt you. I know I destroyed everything. But the children don't have to suffer for my mistakes," she whispered. "They already have," Nathan said softly, "and it's not because of me." Silence hung between them. Anna's tears fell, but she did not try to wipe them away. "I loved you once," she whispered, almost to herself. "I loved what we had. I know I ruined it." Nathan's face remained unreadable. "I once thought I knew what love was. But love doesn't lie. It doesn't betray you. Love yourself more than anyone else." She tried to reach for him, her hand trembling. "Nathan," she whispered, but he stepped back out of reach. "Goodbye, Anna." And with that, he closed the door. He heard her sobs muffled by the thick wood, but he did not open it again. Eventually, her cries faded, replaced by the emptiness of the night. In the days that followed, Nathan turned his focus back to his life. He and Evelyn had built something fragile but real, a partnership rooted in truth. No matter how hard the conversations became, he confided in her about the encounter with Anna. "She came to ask for your help?" Evelyn asked, placing a hand on his. "For the twins," she said. Nathan nodded, staring into his coffee. "I don't know if I should have felt more anger, sadness, anything." "It doesn't make you heartless," Evelyn said quietly. "It means you've healed." The past doesn't control you anymore. I want the twins to have peace, he said, his voice low. But I can't be pulled back into that chaos. Evelyn squeezed his hand. You can still be there for them, on your terms. You deserve to protect your happiness. Her words resonated with him. He had spent years allowing others to dictate his emotions, his sense of worth. No more. He reached out to the twins, offering small steps, limited contact. They met for coffee, hesitant but meaningful conversations where he made it clear he would always care for them, but on terms that did not invite past demons. Nathan continued to watch from a distance as Anna, his mother, and Jack grappled with the fallout of their choices. Their lives were marked by regret, but he no longer felt considered, assumed by their actions. He walked alongside Evelyn, rebuilding his sense of self. They took trips, built new memories, and even talked about a future neither had dared to imagine before. One evening, standing on a quiet beach as the waves lapped at their feet, Nathan turned to Evelyn. I'm not sure where this road leads, he said, his voice thick with emotion, but I want to walk it with you. She smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. I want that too. Together, they stepped forward. His past was a scar, a reminder of pain, of mistakes, of betrayal, but it no longer defined him. He had chosen love again, and this time it was built on truth. As the sun dipped below the horizon, he knew one thing for certain. He would never let anyone take his happiness from him again. He had earned it.